beer, it's good for you.
Hello and welcome to the video. In this video I'll be giving the Belgian Tripel my full guide treatment. In my usual style guide format I will begin with a little history before then moving on to BJCP notes for competition, before sharing a recipe writing guide and then one of my own tried and tested recipes to this style, along with recent brew day footage. I will then show you the finished beer and give you some tasting notes and impressions. So let's get started with a little history. It may come as a surprise to some, but the Tripel beer style is actually less than 100 years old, and was the love child of Hendrik Verlingden, who is shown forth from the left in the photo shown on screen now. Hendrik was considered a brewing genius, and he regularly assisted the monks at the Trappist Westmaler brewery, and despite not being part of the Trappist circle, he released his own beer under their label. This was very much unheard of before this event, and not to mention afterwards also, so that really emphasises how special Hendrik was. The first Tripel was known as the Whitcap Pater, now also known as Whitcap Tripel, which was first released in 1932. Please excuse my very British pronunciation of this if you are a native speaker of this language. Just 2 short years later, Westmaler released their own version, and this recipe underwent changes until 1956. No further changes have been made to this recipe ever since, and this version is considered by many to be the gold standard of this beer style. Let's now move on to the BJCP's impression of this beer style for competition, which I will condense for key information. Do note that this is simply relevant for competition under the BJCP. It would be fair to say that opinions certainly vary on the BJC's interpretation of various beer styles, but by the mere fact that they are offering guidelines, it's somewhat useful anyway, as opposed to nothing. Aroma. Complex with moderate to significant spiciness, moderate fruity esters and low alcohol and hop aroma. Esters are often citrus fruits such as oranges. Appearance. Deep yellow to deep gold in colour, long-lasting white head. Flavour. Spicy, fruity and alcohol flavour supported by a soft malt character. A moderate spicy hop character is common. Alcohols are soft, spicy, often a bit sweet and low in intensity. Bitterness can vary from medium to high. Mouthfeel medium light to medium body, although lighter than the substantial gravity would suggest. Overall impression strongly resembles a strong golden ale but slightly darker and somewhat fuller bodied, usually with a more rounded malt flavour too. Now shown on the bottom of the screen are the BJCP vital statistics along with an average BU-GU ratio figure to the right. This screen is now complete and is ready for a screenshot if you are one of my viewers that does this. I will now go through some recipe writing guidelines for this beer style, starting with malt and fermentables. At 75% plus of your grist, Pilsner Malt is your base malt of choice for a Tripel. It offers a clean and crisp base for your other ingredients to shine on. At up to 20% of your fermentables you will have sugar. For this style you want clear sugar. Some simply use white table sugar for brewing, whereas others will choose Candi sugar which has been inverted. I suggest that you try both ways at some point to taste the difference. For some there is no difference. You will find guides online that will show you how to make it yourself if you would like to save some money. The main aim of sugar is to lower the body of the beer to aid in drinkability. Despite this being a relatively high alcohol style, its body should not be high, hence the use of sugar. Next we have aromatic malt at up to 10%, which is also known as melanoidin malt. This is a very popular malt for this style and it is used to replicate decoction mashing. At up to 5% you can expect honey flavours and aromas, which will intensify as you run up to 10%. I would suggest starting at up to 5% if you are building a new recipe to test your own taste buds. At 10% this can be too much for many, but some absolutely love it. Biscuit malt can also be used at up to 10% for this style. This roasted malt can vary quite a bit depending on the maltster, so I would suggest checking on this to ensure the one that you use gives the flavours that you are looking for. Some, like the name, will give biscuit-like and malty flavours, whereas others will give a saltine, cracker-type flavour. Again, start with a small amount of this malt for a new recipe. 5% is about right for most people, whereas 10%, depending on the maltster, can really dominate, and some would say ruin a style like this one, whereas again, others will love it. Two other great malts for this style, often overlooked and yet very popular in Belgian breweries, are Caramunich and Caramunich I. I would recommend that these can both be used at up to 12% of your grist for this style. Again, there are different versions to take note of. If these malts are obtained from American maltsters, they tend to be more subdued when compared to the versions obtained from either Belgian or other European maltsters. Another important point, for this style always use the lowest colour version you can find. Caramunich is often a little toasty with a malty caramel and often a toffee-like flavour, whereas Caramunich is similar but much more grainy and less malty compared to Munich. They are both very nice within this style. A further point in general is that when it comes to the use of these caramalts along with biscuit and aromatic malt, it really is best to choose just one of them alongside your base malt and your sugar. This style to my mind also benefits from the low use of these malts also. Sometimes less is more. Let's now move on to the hops. This style, like all Belgian styles, is malt and yeast forward, but naturally you will need to balance its alcohol at the very least, but it is common to add in a little hop flavour too. With this in mind, usually you will be adding hops for this style at the start of the boil and also at 15 minutes to the end of the boil for flavouring. Popular hop varieties are now listed on screen. Be sure to keep the hops to noble varieties if you want this to be to style. And lastly, let's now look at yeast. When it comes to yeast selection for this style, there are various options available, and I am sharing recommended examples in both dry and liquid form at the bottom of the screen now. I suggest taking the time to read up on these to determine what best fits what you are looking for, and naturally there are more types beside these that actually will fit the profile. One area where I've been doing a lot of experimentation in the last year or two is co-fermentation with kveik yeast. This allows you to gain the flavours and benefits from more than one type of yeast. Belgian styles are ideal styles to benefit from this due to the desired flavour profiles and the longer conditioning time needed when just Belgian yeast is used. If you are looking for more information on this, then shown on screen is a video where I gave an introduction to this topic. With this particular style we want the flavours from the Belgian yeast and the utility of fast conditioning from the kveik. I will give full details on this aspect later on in the video during my tried and tested recipe brewing footage, which is coming up right after this next section, which covers water profiles. Here are a couple of examples of water profiles for this style. Firstly, we have the authentic Westmalle water, which certainly has its fans, but so does a soft water profile listed also below. Again, this is a case of trialling for yourself and seeing which fits your taste buds the best. Naturally, there are other choices too. The best thing here though is to suit yourself rather than others. One of the most pointless arguments ever are around what tastes the best, as we all taste things differently. Brew your own beer for your own taste. Let us now look at my tried and tested recipe to this style along with brew footage from a recent brew where I used the Brewzilla 65 litre brewing system. Naturally this recipe will suit other brewing systems too. I am sharing this recipe in full in this video's description and also via Brewfiver via an internet link which is also in this video's description, or you can also find it by searching on the Brewfiver cloud. To convert it to your brewing system on Brewfiver, simply change the equipment section and scale it to the volume desired. You should then replace my ingredients with your own and ensure the values for IBU and gravity match that for the original. This is easily done by using the recipe in the video's description for reference. Let's get this mash started and go through the details of this recipe. Firstly, this mash is a 3-step plus mash out. It begins in the low mash temperature range and gradually progresses into the upper range for extra special complexity and higher fermentables compared to a cookie cutter 1-step plus mash out. This is very common with Belgian styles and the triple really benefits from these extra steps. This mash looks a little bit messy at the moment, and this is mostly due to me deciding to use rice hulls due to this being milled a little finer than optimum, and this was done to avoid a potential stuck sparge or mash. As always, this will clean up as we progress through this mash. There you go, looking better already. Now shown on the left of the screen are the vitals for the brew and the grain bill. In keeping with this style we have a healthy 9.2 ABV along with a nice light colour at 14 EBC which equates to about 7.1 SRM. Balancing the alcohol is 30 IBU which gives this recipe a BU-GU ratio of 0.38 which is bang on the average for this style. Let's now go through the fermentables shown here. As expected, at 83% we have our Pilsner Malt. This is where our main fermentables are obtained, along with a crispness that is ideal for this style. At 13% we have clear Candi sugar. Personally, I use this as opposed to regular sugar because my taste buds actually prefer it. At this level I also find that it also drops the body nicely in keeping with this style, and for the taste buds are the majority. And finally at 4% I have Caramunich, which I use for malt flavouring. Personally, I much prefer the effect of this malt compared to the others that we talked about earlier in the recipe writing section. You can certainly have fun experimenting with all of these for your own taste, along with the various percentage levels that can be used. Personally, I feel that this recipe works best with more subtle flavours from the grain bill that harmonise with the hops and yeast rather than competing with them. I then did a quick spalge and noticed all the fine bits from milling on the top plate. After some muttering about wishing I had crushed the grain myself, I then set the system to the boil. Whilst waiting for the boil, I used my bucket blaster to clean my Grainfather conical. This footage was taken before I bought the Wi-Fi controller upgrade late in 2020. I figured that I would use this fermenter seeing as pressure fermentation was not needed for this one, and that all I needed was temperature control. Let's now move on to the boil. Details are shown on the right hand side of the screen. Please note this 60-minute boil time despite the Pilsner Malt being used. There is no need for 90-minute boils these days with the technology behind the malting process. You will also note just 2 hop additions here, as is common with Belgian beer styles. One of these at the start of the boil for bittering, and the second at 15 minutes until the end of the boil for a little flavouring. Both of my hop additions here use Saaz hops. I really enjoy the effect of its delicate bitterness and its mild earthy herbal spicy flavours. It is to my mind the best all-rounder noble hop, and during the brewing year I get through kilos of it. Here we are now at the late boil stage and things are really cooking. It became increasingly difficult to film effectively here due to the amount of steam going on, but it was high time I added the Candi sugar. I like to add this during the later stages of the boil personally, and I add this in sections to allow all to boil in gradually. I prefer to use a hop spider for this process as it avoids anything burning on the bottom. In goes the last of it now, and what I could really do with is some extra extraction in here. It is on my list. Before you suggested, I'm already using a fan on the side of the brewing system, but with the larger units it is just not enough. Anyway, it is a very nice vigorous boil, so I can live with it. It was then time to start the cooling process via this counterflow chiller, which starts with recirculation back into the brewing system for a few minutes until the temperatures are right for transfer into the fermenter. During transfer I pitch both types of yeast into my fermenter at the same time. I've been testing co-fermentation for this style for quite a long time now, and my preference is to use Mangrove Jack's M31 alongside Vos Kveik, and I really like Lollemon's Isolate for this purpose. Shown on screen now is a fermentation summary with Celsius shown at the top and Fahrenheit shown at the bottom. You can see that this fermentation is started at 25 degrees Celsius or 77 degrees Fahrenheit and finished at 28 Celsius or 82 Fahrenheit. An average time for the first step is 5 days, and then ramp up temperature per day is shown on the far right of each section on screen. I suggest leaving this one in the fermenter for at least a week, assuming you have a stable end gravity, for 3 days, but I would recommend 10 days in total from start to finish before transfer into a carboy or a keg to allow the yeast to finish up its cleanup. Personally, I used a keg, as you can see. This keg was CO2 burped 3 to 4 times to ensure that no oxygen was remaining in the keg. The keg was then left to sit at cool room temperatures for a month for conditioning. Naturally, if you do not wish to use a keg, then I would recommend a carboy filled up to the bottom of the neck. Each time that I've trialled this recipe, this method of a 1 month conditioning in bulk, be it in a carboy or a keg, has worked out very well. If you must go the bottle route, then you will need to add some more weeks to your conditioning time, but considering the usual conditioning time for a beer of this style, you really should have no concerns. Let's now give the end beer a pour. Looking good, right? So good that I think I will show you the same pour a little closer up. Yes, I am very pleased with this one. It has certainly taken an awful lot of experimentation, which I've enjoyed immensely, but it is also great to have an end prize, especially when it is something that I can share with people en masse via a video like this one. So now you can see that it looks good, let's move on to my tasting notes. Let's face it, this is the most important part of any beer. Aroma. This beer has a complex and very pleasing aroma that starts with fresh spice and sweet caramel notes that then leads into citrus fruits, most notably orange. On entry you will taste citrus fruits, most notably orange, closely followed by soft caramel malt with a gentle spice on the finish, not bitter nor sweet, just comfortably in the middle. Each sip reveals new blends of these flavours as you get further down the glass. I note that this end beer enjoys all of the characteristics of both the Mangrove Jack's M31 yeast, which is for sure my favourite for this beer style, alongside the fast conditioning benefits of Voskveg, with a little bit of its flavour I believe. And here is my final impression. I am simply delighted by the end result of this project. This is a very tempting and easy drinking example of this style, that boasts much complexity despite its very fast turnaround. This is certainly a complex marriage of spice, fruit, malt and alcohol. This is now the second beer style where I have shared my co-fermentation findings. The first was the Belgian Double. Please do let me know in the comments section of this video which beer styles you would like to see covered next where co-fermentation has benefit. I would also love to hear from anyone who has co-fermentation experience that they would be kind enough to share for the benefit of all. If you would like to discuss any of the topics raised in this video or anything beer related, then head to this YouTube channel's Facebook group. Links to join are shared on screen for those who are not already members. This now brings this video to a close. If you have any questions then please let me know via YouTube or Facebook. I do hope that you found this video to be useful, interesting and enjoyable. If appropriate then please like this video on YouTube, and if you've not done so already then please subscribe. I regularly post new content. Happy brewing!